I stood at the edge of the grand ballroom in my family's estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, watching my sister Serafina command the attention of every single person in the room. The wedding rehearsal was supposed to be a simple affair, but nothing with Serafina was ever simple. She stood there in her designer rehearsal dress, a vision in cream silk that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her perfect blonde hair cascading down her shoulders like liquid gold. Everyone's eyes were on her, as they always were, as they always had been since we were children. "Nadia." Her voice cut through the murmur of conversation like a whip. "Stop lurking in the shadows like some kind of ghost. You're ruining the aesthetic of my rehearsal photos." I felt the familiar heat of humiliation crawl up my neck as 50 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. I had deliberately chosen a spot near the French doors leading to the garden, hoping to remain unnoticed. My navy blue dress, which I had thought was perfectly appropriate when I put it on this morning, suddenly felt cheap and dowdy compared to the sea of designer outfits surrounding me. "Come on, little sister," Serafina continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness that didn't reach her ice blue eyes. "Go stand at the very back. We need to make sure the important people are visible in the photos." Her friends tittered with barely concealed laughter. Madison, her maid of honor, didn't even try to hide her smirk. I caught my mother's eye, hoping for some kind of intervention, but she merely pursed her lips and looked away, adjusting the pearls at her throat. My father was deep in conversation with Brandon's father, discussing golf or stocks or whatever wealthy men discussed at these events, completely oblivious to what was happening. I started to move toward the back of the room, my heels clicking against the marble floor, each step feeling like a walk of shame. That's when I felt it, a warm, steady hand on my shoulder. I looked up, startled, into the darkest brown eyes I had ever seen. The man attached to those eyes was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him like it was painted on, and completely unfamiliar to me. "I don't believe we've met," he said, his voice deep and carrying an authority that made the conversations around us quiet slightly. "Julian Thorne." I knew that name. Everyone knew that name. Julian Thorne was the tech billionaire who had built his empire from nothing, the man whose company, Nexus Technologies, had revolutionized artificial intelligence in ways that made him one of the richest men in America before his 35th birthday. What he was doing at my sister's wedding rehearsal was beyond me. "Nadia Hayes," I managed to say, acutely aware that everyone was now watching us. "Ah, the other Hayes' daughter," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "The one who actually has a brain, from what I've heard." Serafina's perfectly painted lips parted in shock. "Julian, how lovely to see you," she interjected quickly, gliding over to us with the grace of a swan and the predatory instinct of a shark. "I didn't know you knew my little sister." "I don't," Julian said simply, his hand still on my shoulder. "But I know of her. Phoenix Innovations, isn't it, Nadia? Impressive what you've built." I felt my spine straighten slightly. Phoenix Innovations was my company, the tech startup I had built from my apartment in Boston while working nights to pay for my MIT degree. It was my secret, my escape, the one thing in my life that Serafina and my parents couldn't touch or diminish. "Oh, that little project of hers." Serafina laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Nadia likes to play businesswoman. It's cute, really, though nothing compared to what Brandon's company does, of course." Brandon, her fiancé, shifted uncomfortably beside her. He was handsome in that generic country club way, with sandy hair and blue eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. His family owned a mid-sized investment firm that had been trying to court Nexus Technologies for months. "Actually," I heard myself saying, my voice stronger than I expected, "Phoenix Innovations just closed a Series B funding round at $100 million valuation." The room went silent. Even the string quartet seemed to pause between notes. Serafina's face flushed an unbecoming red. "You're lying." "She's not," Julian said smoothly. "I led the round myself. Your sister is quite the entrepreneur, Serafina. While you were planning this wedding, she was building an empire." I watched my sister's face cycle through emotions like a slideshow. Disbelief, anger, and finally, rage. She had always been the golden child, the beautiful one, the one who was supposed to succeed. I was meant to be the footnote in her story, not the other way around. "Well," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled fury, "how wonderful for you, Nadia, though I'm sure Julian's interest in your little company is purely professional. After all, we can't all rely on our looks to get ahead in life, can we?" The insult was so blatant, so cruel, that even some of her friends looked uncomfortable. Madison actually took a small step away from her. But I had heard worse from Serafina. I had been hearing it my entire life. "You're right," I said quietly. "We can't all rely on our looks. Some of us have to rely on our intelligence, our work ethic, and our integrity." "Integrity?" Serafina laughed sharply. "Is that what you call it? Hiding away in Boston, never visiting family, missing every important event? You missed Mom's birthday party last month." "I was closing a deal with Microsoft," I replied. "A $30 million contract. I'm sure Mom understood." I glanced at our mother, who was now paying attention, her face pale. She hadn't understood. She never understood. To her, I was the daughter who had abandoned the family, who had chosen computers over cotillions, code over country clubs. Money isn't everything, Nadia. My father finally spoke up, his voice carrying that patronizing tone I knew so well. Family is what matters. Funny, Julian interjected, his voice like ice. That's not what you said when you were begging me for an investment in your hedge fund last year, Mr. Hayes. You seemed to think money mattered quite a bit then. My father's face went red. I hadn't known about that. There was so much I didn't know about my family's finances. But looking around the opulent ballroom, at the excess of it all, I was beginning to understand. The Hayes family fortune wasn't what it used to be. How dare you, Serafina hissed at Julian. This is my rehearsal dinner, my day. Every day is your day, from what I can see, Julian replied coolly. But perhaps it's time you learned that the sun doesn't actually revolve around you. Brandon stepped forward then, trying to play peacemaker. Everyone, let's just calm down. We're all family here. Are we? I asked, surprising myself with the bitterness in my voice. Because family doesn't usually treat each other the way I've been treated. Family doesn't usually make one daughter feel worthless, so the other can shine brighter. Oh, here we go. Serafina rolled her eyes dramatically. Poor little Nadia, always the victim. Maybe if you weren't so pathetic, people would treat you better. That's when something in me snapped. 28 years of being the lesser daughter, the ugly duckling, the disappointment, all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. You know what, Serafina? You're right. I have been pathetic. Pathetic for still coming to these events. Pathetic for still seeking approval from people who will never give it. Pathetic for letting you make me feel small when I've accomplished more in the last 5 years than you have in your entire life. Accomplished? Serafina's voice was rising now, shrill and angry. You sit in front of a computer all day. I'm getting married to Brandon Whitmore. I'm going to be a Whitmore. Congratulations, I said flatly. You're marrying a man whose company is hemorrhaging money and desperately needs a contract with either Nexus Technologies or Phoenix Innovations to stay afloat. Tell me, does Brandon know that you maxed out 3 credit cards on this wedding? Does he know about the money you've been taking from Mom and Dad's account? The color drained from Serafina's face. How did you... I'm not stupid, Serafina. I never was. I just pretended to be because it made you feel better about yourself. But I'm done pretending. She raised her hand then, quick as a snake, aiming for my face. But Julian was quicker, catching her wrist mid-swing. The crack of his hand against her wrist was loud in the silent room. I would think very carefully about your next move, he said, quietly, dangerously. Assault charges don't look good on anyone, especially not someone whose future husband's company needs my goodwill to survive. Brandon's face had gone pale. Serafina, what is she talking about? What money? It's nothing, Serafina said quickly, yanking her hand away from Julian. She's lying. She's just jealous because I'm getting married and she's going to die alone with her computers. I have the bank statements, I said quietly. $300,000 over the past 2 years. Mom and Dad's retirement fund is almost empty. The room erupted. My mother gasped. My father started shouting. Brandon was demanding answers, and Serafina was screaming denials. In the chaos, I felt Julian's hand on my elbow, guiding me toward the French doors I had been standing near. Let's get you out of here, he murmured. We stepped out into the cool Connecticut evening, the sounds of the argument fading behind us. The garden was beautiful in the twilight, all manicured hedges and twinkling lights, but I barely saw it. I was shaking, adrenaline and 28 years of suppressed anger coursing through my veins. Are you all right? Julian asked, his voice gentle now, so different from the ice-cold authority he had displayed inside. I don't know, I admitted. I just burned every bridge with my family. My sister's wedding is tomorrow and I just destroyed it. You didn't destroy anything, he said firmly. You just revealed what was already broken. We walked in silence for a moment, following a stone path that led to a small gazebo overlooking the sound. The water was calm, reflecting the last rays of the setting Sunday. Can I ask you something? I said finally. Why did you do that? You don't even know me. Julian was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the water. I knew someone like you once, he said finally. Brilliant, talented, but made to feel small by the people who should have lifted her up. She didn't make it out. You did. Who was she? My sister, he said simply. She took her own life when she was 25. Our parents had convinced her she was worthless, that her art was a waste of time, that she would never amount to anything. They were wrong, but she never got the chance to prove it. I felt tears prick my eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be successful. Be brilliant. Be everything they said you couldn't be. He turned to look at me then, and in the fading light, I could see the pain in his eyes. I've been watching Phoenix Innovations for months. Your AI algorithm is revolutionary. You're going to change the world, Nadia Hayes, with or without your family's approval. It doesn't feel like that right now, I admitted. Right now it feels like I just lost everything. No, he said firmly. Right now, you just gained your freedom. We stood there in silence as the sun finally disappeared below the horizon, and I realized he was right. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Free from Serafina's shadow, free from my parents' disappointment, free from the need to make myself small so others could feel big. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out to see dozens of missed calls and text messages. One from my mother stood out. "How could you do this to your sister? To our family?" I showed it to Julian, who snorted. "Typical. You reveal the truth, and somehow you're the villain." Another text, this one from Brandon. "Is it true? About the money? About my company?" "What are you going to do?" Julian asked. I thought about it for a moment, then typed back, "Ask Serafina. And yes, your company is failing. Phoenix Innovations will not be offering you a contract." "Good," Julian said approvingly. "No mercy for those who don't deserve it." We walked back toward the house, but instead of going inside, I headed for my car. I could hear the argument still raging through the open windows. Serafina's voice, shrill and desperate. Brandon's angry demands. My parents' bewildered protests. "Where will you go?" Julian asked. "Back to Boston," I said. "Back to my real life, the one I built without them." "I have a proposal," he said suddenly. "Nexus Technologies needs a new head of AI development. The position comes with a 10 million signing bonus and a penthouse in Tribeca. Interested?" I stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I never joke about business," he said. "I've been wanting to poach you from your own company for months, but I know founders rarely leave their babies. But if you're ready for the next challenge..." "What about Phoenix Innovations?" "Merge it with Nexus. You'll run the entire AI division. Your team comes with you. You'll have unlimited resources and my full support." It was an insane offer. The kind of offer that changed lives. The kind of offer that meant I would never have to see my family again if I didn't want to. "Yes," I said without hesitation. He smiled then, the first real smile I had seen from him all evening. "Good. My lawyers will send the paperwork on Monday. Welcome to Nexus Technologies, Nadia." As I drove away from my family's estate, I saw Serafina run out onto the front steps, still in her cream silk dress, mascara running down her face. She screamed something I couldn't hear over the engine of my car. In the rearview mirror, I watched her collapse on the steps, Brandon nowhere to be seen. The next morning, instead of attending my sister's wedding, I was on a private jet to New York, courtesy of Nexus Technologies. Julian had sent a car to my Boston apartment at dawn, along with a team to pack my things. As we flew over Connecticut, I wondered if the wedding was still happening. Somehow, I doubted it. My phone had been buzzing all morning with calls and texts from various family members and family friends. I ignored them all except for one from Madison, Serafina's maid of honor. "Brandon called off the wedding. Serafina is having a breakdown. Your parents are freaking out about the money. You're officially persona non grata. Good for you." I showed the message to Julian, who was sitting across from me, working on his laptop. "How do you feel about that?" he asked. "Free," I said honestly. "For the first time in my life, I feel free." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The merger between Phoenix Innovations and Nexus Technologies made headlines in every major tech publication. My net worth went from a respectable few million to over 100 million overnight. The penthouse in Tribeca was everything Julian had promised and more, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and enough space to host the entire Phoenix team for meetings. But the best part was the work. With Nexus's resources, we were able to accelerate our AI development by years. The algorithm I had been perfecting in my tiny Boston office was now being implemented on a global scale. We were literally changing the world, one line of code at a time. 3 months after the rehearsal dinner disaster, I was in my office at Nexus headquarters when my assistant knocked on the door. "Miss Hayes, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says she's your sister." I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't spoken to anyone in my family since that night. "Send her in," I said after a moment. Serafina walked in, and I barely recognized her. Gone was the perfect hair, the designer clothes, the confident swagger. She looked thin, tired, and defeated. She sat down across from my desk without being invited. "Nice office," she said bitterly. "I see you've done well for yourself." "What do you want, Serafina?" "I need money," she said bluntly. "Brandon left me. The wedding vendors are suing me. Mom and Dad cut me off after they found out about the money I took. I have nothing." "And you came to me?" I asked incredulously. "After everything?" "You're my sister," she said, as if that explained everything. "No," I said quietly. "I was your shadow, your punching bag, your stepping stone. But I was never your sister. Please, Nadia, I'm desperate." "You were always desperate," I said. "Desperate for attention, desperate for validation, desperate to be special. The difference is, now everyone can see it." She started to cry then, ugly sobs that would have moved me once upon a time. But I felt nothing. The part of me that had yearned for her approval, for her love, for her to see me as an equal, had died that night in Greenwich. "I'll make you a deal," I said finally. "I'll pay off your debts, all of them. But in exchange, you never contact me again. Not for money, not for holidays, not for anything. We're strangers from this point forward." She looked up at me, mascara running down her face just like that night. "You would cut me off completely? Your own sister?" "You cut me off years ago," I said. "You just never noticed because I kept coming back. But I'm done coming back, Serafina. I'm done making myself small so you can feel big. I'm done." She took the deal. Of course she did. She had no other choice. My lawyer drew up the papers, she signed them, and I never saw her again. I heard through the grapevine that she moved to Florida, married a real estate developer, and had 2 kids. I hope she's happy. I hope she learned something. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. My parents reached out a year later, after their house went into foreclosure. They wanted to reconcile, they said. They were proud of me, they said. They had always known I was special, they said. I didn't respond. Julian and I became close over the years. Not romantically, though everyone assumed we were together. We were something better than lovers. We were partners, equals. 2 people who had clawed their way up from different kinds of darkness and found light in success. The AI division at Nexus became the most profitable part of the company within 2 years. We went public, and my stake made me one of the youngest female billionaires in the country. Forbes did a cover story on me. They wanted to know my secret, my origin story, my inspiration. I told them the truth. I was inspired by a sister who told me I would never amount to anything, parents who never believed in me, and a family that made me feel worthless. They were the best motivation I could have asked for, because every success was proof that they were wrong. The interviewer asked if I ever regretted cutting them off. "No," I said simply. "You can't reach for the stars if you're anchored to the ground. Sometimes the only way to rise is to let go of the things dragging you down." 5 years after that disastrous rehearsal dinner, I was giving a keynote speech at a tech conference in San Francisco. The auditorium was packed, thousands of people hanging on my every word as I talked about the future of artificial intelligence and the importance of believing in yourself when no one else does. Afterward, during the meet and greet, a young woman approached me. She was probably in her early 20s, nervous but determined. "Miss Hayes," she said, "I just wanted to thank you. I've been following your career since the Phoenix Nexus merger. I'm also the black sheep in my family, the one they said would never succeed. Your story gave me hope." "What's your name?" I asked. "Sarah," she said. "Sarah Chen. I'm working on a startup in biotech." "Tell me about it," I said, and I listened as she excitedly explained her revolutionary approach to gene therapy. She was brilliant, passionate, and reminded me of myself at that age, desperate to prove herself to people who would never see her worth. "Here's my card," I said when she finished. "Send me your business plan. I'm always looking for good investments." Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Really. But Sarah, can I give you some advice?" She nodded eagerly. "Stop trying to prove yourself to them. The people who make you feel small, who doubt you, who tell you you're not enough, they're never going to see your worth, no matter how successful you become. The only person you need to prove anything to is yourself." She thanked me profusely and walked away, clutching my business card like it was made of gold. I watched her go and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Complete, absolute peace. That night, in my hotel room overlooking the San Francisco Bay, I thought about that girl I used to be, standing in the shadows at my sister's rehearsal dinner, believing I was worthless. If she could see me now, would she believe it was possible? Would she have the courage to speak up sooner, to leave earlier, to believe in herself without needing a Julian Thorne to show her the way? I like to think she would. But then again, maybe the journey was necessary. Maybe I needed to stand in those shadows to appreciate the light. Maybe I needed to feel worthless to understand my worth. Maybe I needed to lose my family to find myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Saw your keynote online. Brilliant as always. Dinner tomorrow when you're back in New York?" "Absolutely," I typed back. "My treat this time." "Never," he responded immediately. "You know the rule. I discovered you. I feed you forever." I laughed, alone in my hotel room, successful beyond my wildest dreams, and completely at peace with the choices I had made. I thought about Serafina, probably tucking her kids into bed in Florida, living a life I knew nothing about. I thought about my parents, wherever they were now, perhaps finally understanding what they had lost. I thought about Brandon and his failed company, another casualty of betting on the wrong horse. But mostly, I thought about Sarah Chen and all the other black sheep out there, brilliant and overlooked, waiting for their moment to shine. I had become successful for myself, but I had become visible for them, to show them it was possible, to be the example I had needed when I was standing in those shadows. The next morning, I woke up to hundreds of messages. Sarah Chen's business plan was already in my inbox, sent at 3 a.m. with an apology for the late hour. I read through it over coffee. It was brilliant, innovative, and exactly the kind of disruptive technology the world needed. I forwarded it to Julian with a note. I found our next investment. He responded within minutes. If you believe in her, I'm in. That's how it worked now. We lifted others up the way no one had lifted us. We looked for the shadows and pulled people into the light. We created the support system we had never had. A year later, Sarah Chen's company went public. She was on the cover of Time magazine as one of the leaders in biotechnology revolution. In her interview, she mentioned me as her mentor, the person who believed in her when no one else did. The interviewer asked her what advice I had given her that changed her life. She told me to stop trying to prove myself to people who would never see my worth. Sarah said, she taught me that the only validation that matters is the one you give yourself. The article was everywhere. My assistant brought me a physical copy, knowing I liked to keep important moments in print. As I read through it, she mentioned something that made me pause. Your sister called, she said carefully. She wanted to congratulate you on the mention in Time. My sister? I was confused. According to our legal agreement, Serafina wasn't supposed to contact me. She said her name was Rebecca Hayes. She said she was your half-sister? I froze. I didn't have a half-sister named Rebecca, which meant... What did she want? I asked. She said she's getting divorced and needs help. She left a number. I looked at the number. It was a Florida area code. Serafina had created a fake sister to try to circumvent our agreement. It was desperate, pathetic, and exactly the kind of thing the old Nadia would have fallen for. Block the number, I said, and if anyone else claiming to be family calls, don't put them through. My assistant nodded and left. I sat there for a moment, looking at Sarah Chen's bright smile on the cover of Time, thinking about cycles and patterns and the things we repeat until we learn better. That evening, at a charity gala for women in technology, I gave a speech about the importance of chosen family. I talked about Julian, who had seen my worth when my blood family couldn't. I talked about my team at Phoenix, who had believed in my vision when everyone else thought I was crazy. I talked about the network of female entrepreneurs I had built over the years, all of us black sheep in our own ways, all of us proving that success was the best revenge. Family isn't about blood, I said to the room full of successful women. It's about who shows up for you. It's about who celebrates your victories and supports you through your failures. It's about who sees your light, even when you're standing in the shadows. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, woman after woman came up to me with their own stories of family rejection, of being the outsider, of choosing success over acceptance. We were a tribe of outcasts who had built our own kingdom. As I was leaving, I ran into someone I hadn't expected to see. Madison, Serafina's former maid of honor. She looked good, successful in that polished New York way. Nadia, she said, seeming genuinely happy to see me. I've been following your career. Incredible what you've accomplished. Thank you, I said carefully. What are you doing here? I'm a partner at Goldman Sachs now, she said. Turns out watching Serafina implode was a wake-up call. I realized I didn't want to end up like her, beautiful but empty, always needing someone else to validate my existence. How is she? I asked, not because I cared, but because I was curious. Madison shrugged. Last I heard, she was on husband number 3 and still blaming you for ruining her life. She never learned that she ruined it herself. And my parents? Your father had a heart attack last year. He survived, but barely. Your mother is his caregiver now. They live in a small apartment in New Jersey, very different from Greenwich. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sadness, just nothing. They were strangers to me now, people I had once known in a different life. I'm sorry, Madison said, though she didn't sound sorry. I know they're still your family. No, I said firmly, they're not. They haven't been for a long time. As I rode home in my car, I thought about the concept of family, how we're taught that blood is thicker than water, that family is forever, that you should forgive anything because they're family. But sometimes, the family you're born into is just the starting point, not the destination. Sometimes, you have to leave the people who dim your light to find the ones who help you shine. 10 years after that rehearsal dinner, I stood in my office at Nexus, now CEO of the entire company after Julian stepped down to focus on venture capitalism. The wall behind my desk was covered in framed magazine covers and awards, but the thing I was proudest of was a small plaque that read, "The Hayes Foundation for Women in Technology, Bringing Light to Shadows." The foundation had helped over 1,000 women escape toxic situations and build successful careers in tech. Each one had a story like mine, of being told they weren't enough, of being pushed aside for someone prettier or more conventional or less threatening. Each one had proved their doubters wrong. My assistant knocked and entered. "Miss Hayes, your 3 o'clock is here." "Send them in," I said, turning from the window where I had been watching the city below. A young woman entered, nervous and trying to hide it. She was probably 22, fresh out of MIT, with a startup idea and no funding. She reminded me of myself, all those years ago, desperate to prove I was worth something. Sit, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Tell me about your idea. As she talked, animated and passionate about her revolutionary approach to quantum computing, I saw myself at that age. But more than that, I saw her potential, burning bright despite whoever in her life had tried to dim it. Who told you it wouldn't work? I asked when she finished. She looked surprised. How did you know someone did? Because someone always does, I said. For me, it was my sister. She said I would never amount to anything. Who was it for you? My advisor, she admitted. He said women aren't suited for quantum physics. That I should focus on something simpler. And yet here you are, with an idea that could revolutionize the field. Here I am, she agreed, with a small smile. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. I'm going to fund you, I said. $5 million to start, more if you need it. But I have one condition. Anything, she said eagerly. Promise me that when you succeed, and you will succeed, you'll find another woman in the shadows and pull her into the light. Promise me you'll pay it forward. I promise, she said solemnly. As she left my office, practically floating with excitement, I thought about the ripple effects of that night in Greenwich. If Serafina hadn't humiliated me, if Julian hadn't intervened, if I hadn't finally stood up for myself, would I be here? Would this foundation exist? Would all these women have found their light? Maybe everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. Maybe I needed to be pushed into the shadows to understand how to find the light. Maybe I needed to lose my family to find my purpose. That night, at home in my penthouse, I sat on my terrace watching the sun set over Manhattan. The city sparkled below, full of dreams and ambitions, and people trying to prove themselves. Somewhere out there was a girl being told she wasn't enough. Somewhere else was a woman finally realizing she was. My phone rang. It was Julian. I have someone I want you to meet, he said without preamble. Brilliant engineer, terrible family situation. Sound familiar? Send them to me, I said. You know I can't resist a black sheep. That's because you're the queen of black sheep, he said fondly, the one who proved we could be wolves. After we hung up, I stayed on the terrace, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the sky gold and pink and orange. I thought about the name of that story I never wrote, The Final Ray of Light. I had thought it meant the last bit of hope before darkness. But now I understood it differently. I wasn't the final ray of light. I was the first. The first in a long line of women who would refuse to stay in the shadows, who would demand to shine, who would light the way for others. Serafina had tried to make me invisible, but instead, she had made me incandescent. As darkness fell over the city and lights began to twinkle on in thousands of windows, I raised my glass of wine in a toast to the girl I used to be, standing in the shadows at that rehearsal dinner, believing she was worthless. Thank you, I said to her, to that scared, hurt version of myself. Thank you for surviving long enough to become me. Tomorrow there would be more women to help, more lights to kindle, more shadows to banish. But tonight, I sat in my peace, in my success, in my chosen family of fellow outsiders who had become giants. They say the brightest light casts the darkest shadow. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes you have to walk through those shadows to understand just how bright you can shine. And once you start shining, really shining, you realize the shadows were never as powerful as they seemed. The final ray of light wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, and I was just getting started.